Good evening, everyone who's about to join. Yeah. Hope we're all doing well. Hi, everyone give a wave who's joining the live. Hope everyone's well. Like, everyone comment where you're from. Come on. Like, let's see how global DLC is. Hey, not so secret diary of anxiety. Shouting you out. You just reached 10k. So proud of you. Hi, everyone who's joining. Got a really good guest today. We got New York. We got New Jersey. New Orleans, Germany. So we got from New York, from Houston to Germany to New Orleans. We're loving it. So we're just waiting for our guest today, who is the amazing Lily Cornell. She's doing amazing things for the anxiety support, mental health advocacy, depression support, depression awareness. It's going to be a really interesting chat with Lily, and I'm super happy that she has decided to come on the platform and just share everything that she's doing. Hi, so we've got Dublin, Ireland, North Carolina. So from Ireland to Carolina to California. That'll be one hell of a plane journey. Boston, USA, Dubai. Loving it. You love my page, I love your comment. I love that comment. All them hearts as well. So much love going back to you. I'm glad it's helped you a lot. Spain. My mum lives in Spain. She lives in Barcelona. One of my favourite cities in the world. We've got London, France, India, Bristol, UK, South Africa. One of my best friends, his parents are from, well, he's from South Africa. So, hey Lily.
Hi.
You okay, yeah?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm perfect.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for joining the live.
Thank you
I
for
was just saying,
having me.
so I was just saying to the followers, I really appreciate you taking your time out to come and have a chat with us, speak to the followers, and just to explain everything you're doing for the mental health community. Because it's amazing seeing everything you're doing on your own platform. I see that obviously you just started a IGTV series. How long's that been going?
It's been going super well. I mean, I want to say thank you too for having me on this on your platform, because your platform is one that's helped me a lot in the last few months, especially. And I think one of the most powerful things you can do for depression and anxiety and any sort of mental health struggle is give vocabulary to it, and like name it and get as much information as possible. But yeah, my series, IGTV, interview series about mental health, all facets of it. It's super broad. So anything, any and all aspects of mental health that need to be delved into is what I'm trying to do.
And how long have you been doing that for now?
I launched it on July 20th. So
July
it's been, a little over a month.
Brilliant. And how many guests have you got lined up? Do you know how long it's going to be, the first series?
I have so many people lined up. It could go on for so long. I think and as more episodes come out, more and more people are interested, more and more people are reaching out, wanting to be guests or wanting more information. So I see myself in this for the long haul. I think it's going to be, thank you. No, I think it's going to be really good.
And regarding the lives, I'm super impressed with just how they look as well, the aesthetic of them on your page. Who does the editing? Is that yourself, or do you have someone who does the video editing for you?
Yeah, no, I wish I could do that. I'm from Seattle, and there's a Seattle-based company called Clatter and Din that's helping me out with production. But it does take a village, and they've all been super amazing in terms of like really getting into the subject matter and helping me out with that. And they recognize the power that the series can hold. So wanting to make it as accessible as possible for everybody.
Well, that's brilliant. Yeah, it's really, yeah, it's just got a really good look to it. So something that I aspire to. So yeah, keeps everyone on the toes with it looking so good. So yeah.
Thank you.
If you want to just talk about your own mental health journey, just a little bit, an insight of the reason why you decided to come up with this idea of using your platform to speak about mental health openly, and just regarding the sort of guests that you may have coming on.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for me, I've struggled with anxiety my entire life. I think I started going to therapy when I was like 7.
Okay.
You know, and that was at a time when, you know, you're 7 and you don't really like know what's going on. And I mean, there's you know, you don't want to tell your friends like you're in therapy because you're in second grade and no one really knows what that means. But I was lucky enough to have a mom who is really like emotionally in tune and recognizes the benefit of teaching and caring about mental health from a very young age, which I think everyone should, you know, be in tune with. But yeah, I've always struggled with anxiety. My dad passed away when I was 16, took his own life. And so, you know, suicidal ideation has been a really big theme in my life. And a big part of this series is kind of understanding what he was going through, you know, and understanding what people go through when they attempt suicide. And that suicidal ideation is something that I've struggled with. And from my own experience, talking about it, giving name to it, being open about it with friends, family, therapists, psychiatrists is like one of the most powerful and helpful tools possible. So that's, you know, the series was born for me from wanting to be open and wanting to shed some of that stigma.
That's brilliant. And obviously, I can see you're shining a light as well on male mental health as well, which I think is super important. I'm not sure about your own page analytics, but for myself, there's like over 500,000 people, but the split, we're looking at something like 85% women and the rest men. Now, we know that obviously if you look at the science behind it, women are more likely to struggle with anxiety and depression and mental health. But I think it's really important to put a platform out there saying that it doesn't matter what sex you are, it doesn't matter what race you are, it doesn't matter where you're from, what your social background is. Mental illness can happen to anyone. And I think it's really, really good that you're putting that platform out there for people who might not have spoke about it, you know, without you having the platform. So I can see your last guest, for example, he was a close friend to your dad. Is that right? Yeah, so seeing someone like that who's really inspirational, speaking about mental health, I think it was really inspiring, and it was a brilliant interview.
Thank you so much. You know, and I appreciate that insight too about you know, shedding light on mental health and the fact that literally everyone struggles with it, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless, you know, exactly what you were saying. But yeah, I think there's definitely a stigma around male identifying people being open about mental health, and that's why I so appreciate what you're doing as well, because it is something that everybody struggles with and something that everyone should be allowed to have resources around. And one of the interviews I did was with Duff McKagan, who's the bassist for Guns N' Roses, and he talks about he had panic attacks from the age of 16, and his brothers all had panic attacks as well, but none of them spoke about it. You know, and you think about like what that could have been like if he had found solidarity and found community within his own family. You know, they were all experiencing anxiety, but none of them spoke about it because it wasn't, you know, manly in some way. And Eddie Vedder, who was my last interview, spoke about that as well. His just the kind of like stigma around mental health, but especially around men being vulnerable. No,
so I think that's really good that you're spreading light on that. And like you said, with social media now, there's no reason that anyone should feel alone, because obviously a lot of people do feel alone, but I think it's really important having these communities, and I think that's where my motivation comes from. So just a little bit about myself. My dad passed away as well in my early 20s, and it was that bottled up emotion that I kept in that actually 6 months down the line I got a panic disorder. I eventually came out of that, and it was some close friends to me at the time that really spoke to me, because they'd actually been through panic disorders before. So having that support network, like you said, of someone who's close to you is really important on your journey to recovery. And it also shows you that other people, like your friends, have gone through it, and your friends have come out on the other side as well. So I think that's why I think it's really important to get these communities out there, keep doing the things that you're doing. And just like you said, just the more people speak about mental health, how important it is, and how mental illness, there is no stigma with it anymore. And the more we talk about that, then hopefully the more people will be able to help.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, no, to that idea about the stigma, and I think thank you for sharing that your dad passed away. I didn't know that, but I've had many people lose family members, many people who have struggled with anxiety their whole lives, and I think there can be this misconception that like mental health is something that you have to overcome. If you have an anxiety disorder, if you have depression, there's a stigma like, oh, you have to fix it, you have to get rid of it in order to be your best self. And something that I've really been working towards, and something that I've been learning a lot about, is instead of feeling like, oh, I have to completely get rid of this part of my identity and what I struggle with, I need to learn tools to integrate it into my day-to-day life and make it so that it's not, it's not going to derail me. And if I feel anxiety coming on, if I feel depression coming on, that I have the tools to work through that, and to like make it as easy for myself as possible, but not feel like, oh, I'm worthless, or I'm doing something wrong if this stuff isn't completely gone.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really important thing that you've said, because I think that's how anxiety disorders, for example, are fueled by the way that somebody may react to a certain anxious feeling, a certain anxious symptom, and then it's almost that fear of having them symptoms, or like you say, almost thinking, I need to fix this because there's something wrong. Well, that actually shines a light onto it, and your brain starts to then think, oh, this is something that I need to fear. And then it's like a continued cycle of negative thoughts, and obviously the physical symptoms will carry on. So like you said, it's all about changing your behavior to the anxious feelings when they come, letting it in, knowing that it's temporary, and also knowing that it's there to protect you, that even though how horrible the feelings feel, and I'm sure you can relate to that, they will never harm you. So that's really important.
Yeah. And that all feelings are temporary as well. And that's something I think your page is so powerful in this way of having the information and having the vocabulary, as I said, which can be just that in and of itself can be something that's really calming, to know, like, I feel like I'm dying, I feel like something's really wrong with me, but I know it's just a fight or flight response. I know it's a chemical imbalance, and I know it can't stay this way forever.
Yeah. And if we was like, say we're out in the middle of the wild and we had a saber-toothed tiger coming at us, that response is what would actually save our life. So
exactly.
And it's also that our brains, that they don't realize the difference between a perceived threat, so something that we're thinking, and an actual threat. So I think that's where obviously anxiety now, with the stress of modern society, and obviously social media as well, can fuel these things. But I do have some questions from the platform. So I've had quite a lot of people asking just some really interesting questions. Am I right to fire some over to you?
Please.
Brilliant. So the first question is, do you feel talking about anxiety and depression on your platform and in your series has helped your own mental health? And if so, could you give some examples about that?
Yeah. At first, it was really hard. First, it was a very difficult thing to be, I think a lot of people who struggle with mental health have experienced this, that you don't want to be focusing on your anxiety and depression all the time. Like you want to be ignoring it as much as possible. So to be in the situation where now all of a sudden, literally every day, most of my day is consumed by working on this platform that's all about like my own experiences with anxiety and depression. So at first it was difficult, but it ended up being kind of like an exposure therapy situation, where it's like I'm acknowledging these things. I'm not, as you were saying earlier, I'm not letting the fear of having anxiety overtake me. Because I think with anxiety disorders, especially, like I get afraid of being afraid, you know? And so this has actually been really healing and really powerful in, you know, having these discussions and having it be something that I'm open about and not afraid to be thinking about and not afraid to be talking about. So that's an example in my own life. And then, you know, it's also been incredibly healing to hear and see so many other people saying like, wow, it's so amazing to see you being open about this. It makes me feel validated. It makes me feel seen. It makes me feel better, you know, in any way, shape, or form. So that's been incredibly healing.
Yeah, that's amazing. The second question I have is, I really respect everything you do in speaking openly about grief. From your own experience, would you say there's the different stages of grief are the same for each individual? So like maybe in your family, would you have any experiences that did everyone like sort of go through the same stages? Or do you think that it's an individual thing and each person might react to that differently?
I think it's a very individual thing, and I think everyone reacts in their own way. It's interesting that, you know, you were saying you got diagnosed with that panic disorder 6 months after your dad passed. That was, you know, my experience was after my dad passed away, I was, you know, in absolute shock for so long, and I was incredibly high functioning. You know, like I was like working a ton, applying to a bunch of colleges, like finishing my senior year of high school. Like I had compartmentalized it to the point where I like wasn't feeling anything. And then it wasn't until 8-9 months later that I tanked, you know, and my anxiety spiked like crazy. My depression spiked like crazy. And my mental health was really, really poor. And people were saying like, you know, there was kind of a stigma around like that I should have been better at that point because enough time had gone by. But grief is so nonlinear. And for people who may not have seen some of my episodes, my 5th episode is with Monique Minahan, who's a grief and trauma expert. And that episode is we talk mostly about that, about how nonlinear grief is, and how it does look different for everybody. And even, you know, for me, I've experienced a lot of loss in my lifetime. I've experienced loss of like people from natural causes. I lost 3 really important people to suicide in the span of a year. And so even with each loss, it looks completely different for me and how I grieve and how I've coped.
And I think the example that you gave about yourself, I can really relate to as well. So when my dad passed away, it was almost like you say, it was that shock. And then the first 2 or 3 weeks, I ended up going back to work a lot earlier than I think I should have at the time. But like you said, I almost felt like I always wanted to be doing something. Like if I'm doing something, then this is my way of coping. But then obviously I think not letting the feelings in at the time is why 6 months down the line, like you said, I then started to gain, well, what happened was I was working in an office at the time, and I just had like the craziest panic attacks, and it just like stemmed from there. So I think that, I think like yourself, I probably went into it trying to go back to like a routine a little bit sooner than I should have. So I can really relate to what you said there, Lily. So I really appreciate obviously you opening up about that.
Yeah, of course. And for me, one of the main ways that it, you know, I've had generalized anxiety disorder since I was like 7 or 8. But one of the main ways that it manifested for me was like very intense dissociation and depersonalization, which I had never really experienced, but learned a lot about once it started happening to me, because I was in such shock and so high functioning and distracting myself so much that the only way my body could process it was to take me out of my reality, you know? And so I felt like I was in a dream all the time, like I was on drugs all the time, which was very anxiety inducing. But as we were saying earlier, it was my body trying to help me, you know? It was the only way my body knew how to keep me safe and how to let me process in that moment without totally breaking down. So that was a big part of it for me as well.
No, thank you for that. The next question is, what's been your proudest moment so far on the platform? So I know it is early, but I'm guessing there's been a lot of work behind the scenes beforehand as well. So is there any moment that stuck out so far for you?
I mean, I think honestly, like it sounds basic, but like the feedback I've gotten has been like beyond my wildest like Like I never imagined that what I was doing would touch so many people and resonate with so many people. And, you know, I know the whole point of this series is because I know that everybody struggles with mental health. But I didn't realize how deep the craving was for people to talk about it, you know, like just waiting for somebody to bring it up and to give information like you're doing as well. So that part of it has been incredibly rewarding. And just like the comments and DMs I get on a daily basis saying, you know, with their own personal stories of like, this is what I've been through, this is what I'm going through, and like, this is how you've helped me. Yeah. And it's also been really interesting to see too how people gravitate towards the individual episodes. Because people have reached out and said, like, you know, my episode with Dr. Mark Brackett about like emotional intelligence, I had a couple people be like, this literally changed my life, you know, and then other people like have gravitated. So it's been super rewarding and super
like,
interesting.
Yeah, and like you said, it's almost them comments, them DMs that really, with myself, it really motivates you to want to create the best content for everyone to put out there. And that actually leads nicely into the next question, which is, do you get a lot of people DMing you, say that they've been through maybe similar situations to yourself or similar situations to a topic that you might be speaking about on your IGTV series? And they're asking, how does that make you feel when they're actually bringing that to your attention?
Yeah. It's, you know, it brings up a lot of emotion. It's definitely, it's created a community of like solidarity for me, I think, and people that do understand what I've been through to an extent, you know, as much as we can understand each other. But something that I talked about in my first episode with Laura Lipsky is when you're doing work like this, where you are, you know, opening yourself up to other people's stories and sharing your own story, it's very important to take care of yourself and to, you know, not take on other people's empathy and other people's pain, you know, because like to be empathic is such a good skill, but it's also like you can't let it weigh you down and burden you. So that's been a lesson for me
that's really, you know, good advice.
Which I'm sure that you understand as well, is you know, appreciating those stories and really like it's been so amazing to hear from so many people who have been through stuff and are working through it and you know, have the tenacity and the drive and the desire to feel better. But also like it's important to take care of yourself when definitely being exposed to those stories on a daily basis. But yeah, and just another thing about that as well. I've had so many people reach out to me and say that they have also lost loved ones to suicide. And I think suicide is one of those things within mental health that is one of the most stigmatized aspects. And something, you know, even though I've been through my own suicidal ideation, I've lost many loved ones to suicide, it's still something that I have a limited understanding of. And I think there is a limited understanding of what the grief process looks like after that. So it has been powerful for me to find out that like so many other people have gone through that and are looking for the same resources in the same community.
No, yeah, and that I can imagine that, like you said, that's really emotional for yourself, but obviously for that person, knowing the comfort that you're bringing them by talking about these really difficult topics, and like you say, normalizing talking about it, because there is so much stigma behind obviously suicide and things like that. I think that's really incredible what you're doing. And you should be super proud of yourself. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. You really should be super proud.
Thank you so much.
And the next question is a really interesting question. Personally, what age did you start learning about the importance of mental health and illnesses such as anxiety and depression? And do you feel from everything that you know growing up, do you feel that people should be taught about it at an earlier age than they are at the moment?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, you know, 7 is when I really started to have pretty intense anxiety, but it wasn't for a few years that I realized, you know, the way that I was experiencing life, you know, or the way that I was processing things was like a little bit different than most of my peers. So I think,
what did anxiety look like for a 7-year-old? So what sort of symptoms were you having? Can you remember?
Yeah. You know, I would get the physical symptoms of like, I would get headaches and, you know, heart beating really fast. And as a child, you know, I'm like, I'm, is something, do I need to go to the hospital? You know what I mean? So the physical symptoms were part of it. And then also like an excessive fear of, things like robbers or like earthquakes, and things like that. So there was always, I just ran very anxious. Like there was always something that I was like very afraid of. And I can't really remember a time in my life where I was like a carefree child. You know what I mean? Like there was always something I was like very, very worried about, whether it was like, quicksand in cartoons. I'm like, oh, this is like this is something I need to be aware of all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also I've been learning a lot about how mental health issues are like, are biological. Like I get it from both sides of my family. My dad struggled with anxiety and depression his entire life. My mom's side of the family, has a lot of like bipolar and things like that. So it's been interesting to see like how that's manifested similarly. I know my little brother and sister have similar struggles, and we come by it honestly. But so I guess, the journey started early. But as I said, I was lucky enough to have a mom and a dad who were really open with me about it and didn't make me freak out or feel like there was something wrong with me. They just said like, that's anxiety and you run anxious, and that's just how your brain works. And we're going to learn the best tools possible to cope with that and to help you. So they put me in therapy at a really young age, which has only been helpful because there's, you're learning tools, you're learning vocabulary, and that's really empowering to have different tools and words you can lean on, and to have the knowledge about what you're going through. Which I think is important for children, especially,
No,
to
definitely.
not just
Like
be
you said,
relying on.
yeah, it's all about like you say, the psychoeducation behind mental illness. So the more that people start to learn about the symptoms, the more people start to learn about the reason that the heart's beating faster, that it isn't a heart attack coming on, and it's actually the reason that your body's pumping everything that it shows, your blood around your system faster, so you're actually working at a more efficient rate. So I think like the more people actually learn about the symptoms, then the more the more that the fear starts to decrease. So yeah, learning that and going into therapy at such a young age. I think that's, who was it who highlighted it at the time? Was it yourself who went to your parents, or was it them who picked up on it? Can you remember?
I think it was my mom who, asked me like, we know that you're having a hard time with anxiety, because I was cognizant of it, even though I didn't, really know exactly what it was. I knew that like I was afraid, and she's like, here are different tools we can use. And one of them is, to go to talk to somebody about it who knows more about it than I do, And so it wasn't like I was put in, you know what I mean? But it was just like, here's an option for you. Does that feel like the right thing? And it did feel like the right thing for me. So I think trusting kids and their own instincts and their own feelings about their own mental health and how they're responding and reacting is also super important.
No, that's a really good point. And that's all the questions from the platform. I just have just a question for myself, and that is, you said that obviously sometimes you get anxious still. What would you say your best advice, or the best things that work for you are when you're feeling anxious? So is there any holistic approaches that you have? Do you feel that exercise works well for you? Meditation, mindfulness. Is there any avenues that you feel that work well for you?
Yeah, for me, it's a twofold thing. There's self-care practices you have to do when you're not feeling anxious, and I think that's like the biggest thing for me is making sure I'm eating regularly, making sure I'm taking my medication, exercising every day. So I think that's the foundation, and meditating, as you said, like that's the foundation that needs to be built. So that when you are feeling anxious, you have those things to fall back on. You know what I mean? Because that's something I've had to learn the hard way, is like not just waiting until I'm anxious to start taking care of myself. And then when I am, just the other day, I panic attack came on super suddenly, started to dissociate. I was like washing my hands, but felt like my hands were by my side and I was watching someone else wash their hands. So just that when I'm in those times now, as you were saying, like reminding myself, this is my body trying to protect me. I know nothing bad is happening. This is going to pass. And for me, like breathing exercises are super important. Something that a neuroscientist at Harvard, who's a close friend of mine, taught me is when you are feeling anxious, to let your body do the opposite of what it wants to do. So when you're anxious, like you want to tense up, you want to like, so she was like, sit in a relaxed way, open your palms, like let yourself just your body relax and like do the opposite of what it wants to do. And it'll start sending those signals to your brain that like the fighter, there's no a bear attacking you. There's no, there's no immediate threat. So that's something that works for me, definitely.
No, that's brilliant. And with myself, what you said regarding the panic attacks, I think the correct breathing and the deep breathing, that can really get you from a panicking situation to the calm response coming in. So that was really useful for myself. Also, have you ever used thought diaries or journals? Have you ever? Did you find that? Okay?
No, writing's a super big one for me, and writing, again, doing it when I am anxious, but also when I'm not anxious, so that I'm letting that stream of thoughts, constantly out. I'm able to externalize on a regular basis, which is super vital.
No, that's brilliant, and thank you for the insight with that, Lily.
Of course.
And I'd just like to say, obviously, I want to thank you for coming on. I think it's amazing what you do, and I think it's really inspiring. And I think you're giving hope as well to a lot of young people, a lot of young adults. And like I said, I think it's very courageous what you're doing, and I think you're being the impacts that you're giving to many people. You're only probably seeing only the top of it. I think it's probably the ripple effects that you're having on the community is amazing. So I'm just super proud. I'm really happy that we connected. I'll be tuning in. I think it's every Monday, is it?
Yes, Monday at 9. And on my Instagram. So if anyone's watching that wants to tune in, just follow my Instagram. It'll be there every Monday.
So do you have any other projects that you're working on at the moment? And if anyone wants to come over and see more stuff from you, is it just Instagram that you focus on? Where can they find more of your work?
Instagram mainly. My website's linked in my bio on Instagram that has more information about resources. It has like the bios for all the guests. And I have a lot of really amazing interviews that I'm super excited for coming up. And one of them is actually, as you were saying about, younger people. One of my next ones is a panel of friends of mine who are within my age range talking about their experiences with mental health, as part of like young millennials, Gen Z kind of generation, which I'm super excited about. And the focus on young people is something that I'm really hoping to achieve.
Well, that sounds like it's going to be really interesting. Is that the next one, or is that in the
line?
A
couple weeks? In a couple weeks, yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, so like I said, I'd like to thank you again for taking the time out to speak to the followers. I'll be keeping an eye on your work, and obviously I'll be singing your name from the rooftop. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. Your platform is amazing. It's helped me so much, and thank you for your support, and thank you for having me today.
No problem. Thanks, Leah, and enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah.
Thank you. You too.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.